Chris, if you have that conviction, resign, show the courage and resign. Chris, if you do that and you resign and run as a Liberal in the riding, let's go tour. I'll run for the Conservatives against you in your riding, and we'll see who wins.
Mark Carney dropped his budget yesterday, but that wasn't the only big news to hit Canadian politics. Chris d'Entremont, former Deputy Speaker for the Conservative Party and former Shadow Minister, announced that he was crossing the floor, resigning from the Conservative Party and joining Mark Carney's Liberal government, despite the fact that only 10 days before he was lamenting in Parliament how angry he was on behalf of his constituents at Mark Carney's policies. A lot of people have been putting statements online, voicing their displeasure about this, and one of those people is actually a neighbor of Chris d'Entremont in the riding of South Shore St. Margaret's. Joining us today to talk about what has been going on is the former MP of South Shore St. Margaret's, Rick Perkins. Thanks for joining us on Northern Perspective.
Pleased to be here. Just so, wish Rick, it was on another issue.
Yes.
Right. Well, you've been a staple for the Conservative Party for a long time, and you were very, very effective in the prosecution of the Trudeau government, especially during the STTC scandal and the Green Slush Fund public accounts. So on behalf of all Canadians, let's just get this right out of the way. Thank you for your service in that and for your convictions.
Thank you. Thank you, Ryan.
So Did this surprise you when this was announced yesterday? Because you are relative neighbors to Chris d'Entremont, because he's just one riding over.
Well, not only are we neighbors, but we've been friends for 2 decades through politics, mainly through politics. And certainly when you get elected together, you are become even closer, right? Because it's a team sport and you're fighting the battles together. And because Chris chose to seek in the last Parliament the position of being Speaker, and he ended up being Deputy Speaker, he and I worked closely together to make sure that while his voice was muted, because in Parliament, once you're Deputy Speaker, you can't get into the partisan statements, that I worked closely with him in his riding to make sure his interests were represented in Parliament, but also back in the riding on the primary issue of the fishery. And what's important to understand for all those folks watching is the commercial fishery is our largest industry in Nova Scotia, and 25% of the value of the entire Canadian fishery on all 3 coasts is in my riding and Chris's riding combined. I have 7,000 commercial fishermen alone in my riding. So those issues and the destruction of that industry by the Liberals over 10 years and has been an incredible economic harm to our area. In fact, some of your viewers probably remember about 2020, there was the burning down of a lobster pound. That was in Chris's riding in relation to all the illegal fishing that was happening in a place called St. Mary's Bay in Chris's riding. So I worked hard. I invited his constituents to committee. In fact, a year ago, I had his constituents in camera committee because of the threats to their lives and the lawlessness in Chris's riding. I brought them to Ottawa, and they explained the terrorism, the gunshots into their house, how they were living in hiding, how there was total lawlessness, and the Liberals were doing nothing to stop it. And Chris was thankful for that. So he's joined a party that has done everything it can to destroy his own riding. But I'm babbling here a bit, but because I'm passionate about this issue. 3 weeks ago, the rumors started that Chris might be crossing the floor. I heard about them. There were mysterious comments out there about maybe 3 Conservatives crossing the floor, one from Atlantic Canada. So I reached out to Chris. I said, tell me you're not thinking about crossing the floor, because I know he's had a bruised ego since the resumption of Parliament on an issue we can talk about. And he was in Europe on a parliamentary thing. He said, that's crazy Ottawa stuff. Of course not. I've spoken to him a bunch of times over the last 3 weeks, including this past weekend, where I phoned him only a couple days ago and said, looks like there's a chance the budget might fall. So I'm getting my campaign team ready. Chris, are you getting yours? And he said to me, Rick, if an election happens over the budget, I'll lose my seat. I've won 8 elections. I might as well not run because I don't want to lose. So for Chris, he had given up long ago. And this floor crossing on principle really wasn't about that. It was about preserving the job he thinks he can preserve by staying in the other side. And he's been asked, what did you get? You've probably seen it on social media. He must have got promised something. And he was asked that by our leadership team yesterday. Normal thing, cabinet job. Well, I don't think Chris would want a cabinet job because it's a lot of work and he's not the hardest working man in show business. But Chris got a few shekels. What he got, apparently, is a little bit of money to repair a couple of wharves in his riding. So his price was cheap.
And what is the price for the people that are working in his Parliament office, the people that were working for his constituency office for the Conservative Party, and the volunteers that gave their blood, sweat, and tears over the last few years, especially this year, to win him that seat?
That's a great question, because this is, like most businesses, this is a relationship business. It's personal. The people who help get you elected, nobody gets elected on their own. They have to have a team of volunteers. And the people who work for you as an MP in your office are about as close as you can get. And what a lot of people, I think, are, from my experience, certainly the last 4 years and my experience in this election, there's a lot of people in the public don't understand that the people who work in your office are conservatives. Or if you're a liberal, they're liberals. They're not bureaucrats. So I know that I've spoken to some of Chris's staff in his office. One of them has quit. The others, we're small town Nova Scotia. Decades of working with conservative members and volunteering, don't know what to do because they have a job and there aren't a lot of rural job opportunities, but they're not liberals. And so, my understanding is that basically he didn't tell his staff in his office, in his riding, about this before it was in the media. He didn't even have the respect for his own team.
Wow.
Now, I've been reached out, I know you guys have, from a lot of people, fishermen, people on the board. I was just responding to an email before we went on air. They're asking me, what do we do? Is there any way we can do something? We worked blood, sweat, and tears as a volunteer to get him elected. He won by 553 votes. And I can tell you, the 3 main organizers in the fishing community were on the phone to me last night saying, I put my reputation on the line because Chris didn't speak publicly about the fishery because of his role. And they all said, I'd vote for Rick because he's speaking for me, but Chris doesn't say anything. And they said, trust me, we work with Rick, we work with Chris, he cares about the fishery, trust me. And so people went out and voted based on these people who are well known in the fishing community, giving assurances that Chris was a conservative and was fighting for the fishery. They feel incredibly betrayed.
Well, and Chris had a press conference today, and he was speaking and saying, well, I'm doing what I think is best for my constituents. Well, all I hear is I, and me. And, we saw when Parliament opened and Chris stood up and announced that he wasn't going to be submitting his name for Speaker of the House. And you could hear the gasps throughout the House. And you could see that he was really, really unhappy. But that's what being a team player is, because the Conservatives needed every single vote that they could get. And then I guess through an internal caucus vote, they were deciding who they were going to support for deputy speaker, and someone else, won out.
So the way it works is, I went through 2 of these speaker votes in the 44th Parliament when I first got elected in 2021, which resulted in Anthony Rota being chosen, and we chose him. The Liberals didn't vote for him, even though he was a Liberal. Very strategic. Chris put his name forward. The way there's the speaker role, then there's deputy speaker, then there's what's called the chair of committees. There are basically three roles. The opposition, in the case of the numbers this time in this Parliament, the 45th Parliament, would get two of those spots. So what a lot of people don't understand, unlike the Liberals, our caucus is unbelievably democratic. Everything, every motion, every private member's bill has to go through a whole elaborate caucus process of allowing members. The critic has to call people together. The caucus members opine on whatever the presentation is. That critic then takes it to a cabinet committee on either economic policy, defense, or social policy. That committee can then change the recommendation. Then it goes to the leadership team, which is chaired by Pierre on the next day. They can change it again. And then whatever comes out of that, the critic has to stand up on Wednesday before caucus and present it as it comes out of the leadership team in that process. And then the debate happens, and caucus members debate, and we all have a red or a green card, and we vote on what happens. So it's a very strategic thing to pick who your speaker is. So Chris was running for speaker. So there were a number of caucus members that also wanted to run for speaker. So what happened in caucus is they all get 5 minutes to stand up and make a speech as to why they should be the caucus member from our team that is put forward. Because as you said, Ryan, we can't split up the vote. If somebody votes for this one and that one and that one, then the Liberals get what they want. So it's a very strategic thing. So Chris stood up there with the others, made his pitch, and he finished last. Other caucus members did. Now, Chris took this as a personal affront since he had been deputy speaker. And there's a lot of reasons for it. He made some foolish rulings when he was in the chair that angered our caucus members. And he paid the price for it. And instead of sitting back and saying, okay, so what's my situation here? My situation is there are 11 ridings in Nova Scotia, and I'm the only Conservative MP. And this is what I told him after this. I said, you are now, not me, you are now the voice in Parliament in Nova Scotia to the opposition to these Liberals. Take up the challenge. You and Pierre, I know, because we talked about it, he expects you to be the voice internally and in the House, and you need to lead the charge. Pierre's not going to say what's best for Nova Scotia. Only you as an MP can say that. And he wants you to do that. You can be and have to be our voice. It does no good for you to sit in that big green chair because you can't speak. We need you to speak for our province on the things the Liberals are doing to destroy our economy. And he just wouldn't bite. He wouldn't bite all summer. I worked on him all summer to say, stand up, take your role, your leadership role within the caucus. And you know what? Because we have a very democratic caucus, if you have issues with the direction, the tone, the positions we're taking, speak. Go to the microphone and speak. And if you don't want to do it publicly, go sit down with the leader. Go sit down with the deputy leader. Go sit down with the whip and express your concerns. And I can tell you, I know firsthand from the last Parliament, and I know from this one because my colleagues talk to me very regularly, every couple of days, Chris never raised a concern. You mentioned his press conference today. He said, I was concerned about the direction of the party, the direction the leadership was going. I was not identifying with it. Then why didn't you stand up in caucus and say something?
Yeah, that just tells me that this was all personal and that he forgot who put him there, which was all of those thousands of people who voted for him in that election, and sounded like he, was trying to get to be Speaker of the House, didn't, and as a result of not getting that, he he sulked, had a hissy fit, and decided to cross the floor. And I think it's absolutely disgusting that he would do that. I don't agree with crossing the floor in any situation unless your party is committing like overtly immoral, corrupt, and criminal acts. That's the only time I would expect that. But you were elected as a Conservative MP on the Conservative platform, and to switch like that, it's a betrayal of the democratic process, in my humble opinion. Would you agree with that?
100%. Look, you fight hard in an election campaign. The day before the debates in the national campaign asked me to launch, because Pierre was preparing, launch our national fisheries policy. We were the only party with a platform on the commercial fishery. We were surrounded in my riding. Actually, it was Halifax West. It used to be in my riding, but under redistribution, it went to Halifax West. We were surrounded. All the candidates were there. Chris d'Entremont stood beside me to do the French side of it. And we were surrounded by fishermen in that community. And obviously, a big part of that was pointing out the destruction of this industry. And Chris quite gladly stood up there and was proudly part of making that pitch in the campaign as a Conservative. And when you're elected, you can let your ego run away with you and think you're all that, and that it's you that got you there. The reality is, as we know, most people vote by party and by leader. And Chris would say after the election, he only won by 553 votes because his margin would have been better, but Pierre dragged him down. He said today and yesterday, when he made his announcement yesterday, he said Pierre never came to his riding in the campaign. Well, which way is it, Chris? Was Pierre a drag? If he was a drag, why did you want him to your riding in the election campaign? You obviously wanted him in the riding in your election campaign because you felt you were going to lose, and you thought the presence of Pierre Poilievre in your riding would boost you over the edge. And the reality is he only won by 553 votes because of Pierre Poilievre and his work to support what we've done in rural communities and the fishing communities and the cost of living, which is acute in rural Atlantic Canada. And so this is self-interest. It's nothing but self-interest, bruised ego, like a 9-year-old kid didn't get his way. He didn't get to be deputy speaker. He got voted out of the room, off the bus, whatever you want to call it. And he went and sulked and stewed and sulked. So he can try and justify afterwards what he did. He's the one that's got to look in the mirror and say, there's another fisherman calling me from Chris's riding. Sorry, my phone just went off. He can look and say, this is on some sort of principle. The only principle here is his belief that he was scorned by his colleagues on the speaker's job. Nobody loved him. And so I'll go sit because, hey, they're talking to me over in the Liberal Party. They seem to like me. We're on planes together. I made 126 flights last year. You're on planes, when we're flying from Halifax, we're flying on those little Rouge planes, 2 metal bars, right? So you're on the planes with the Liberals. Everybody's on the same planes back and forth, the same schedule. Chris liked the hobnob with the Liberals. And, he's trying to, say, I'm friends with everybody. And he expected that they would actually vote for him for the speaker's job. And I was telling him that there's absolutely no way the Liberals would vote for Hetty Fry for speaker before they would vote for you, Chris. I mean, it has nothing to do with you, Chris. It has to do with the fact that they would rather have a dirty, rotten Liberal in the seat, even if it were Hetty Fry, than a Conservative they might like.
So we had heard some rumors through the grapevine that there was, personality clashes between Mr. d'Entremont and the leader. Do you know, is that true? Do you have any comment regarding that?
No, I don't. Personality, Chris would have to speak up for you to see a personality clash, and he never did. And last summer, 2024, Pierre came to Nova Scotia, he came to my riding and Chris's riding. It was the first time to both the ridings. Generally, I kept telling Pierre, I don't want you in my riding. I hold this riding. I want you in the ridings we don't hold. Chris kept whining and saying, I want the leader here. It's like, why do you want the leader here? The leader needs to spend his time in ridings we don't hold winning seats. I want the leader here. So if there was such a personality clash, why did he whine and whine and whine so much? And I can tell you, it was a lot of whining in our Atlantic caucus, to some of us privately. Why won't the leader come to my riding? If Pierre was such a drag and such a personality conflict, why did he want him there? Why did he stand beside him and walk in the Acadian parade last summer proudly with Pierre down the main street of the Acadian Festival in August in his riding? Why did he stand on the stage in his riding after Justin Trudeau got off the stage on an airport old airport filled field for a concert with thousands and thousands of people, as Justin Trudeau left the stage and Chris D'Entremont went up to the stage to introduce Pierre Poilievre? If there was such a personality clash, why did you do that? It's all after the fact, lame excuses for somebody who felt scorned, or quite frankly, has a misconception about what's going to happen in his riding. I think it's true. I do believe last weekend when he was saying this to me, that I will lose my riding if the election is now, that's the thing he was most scared about, was not the needs of his community, not whether or not a $78 billion deficit was a horrible thing, not whether or not the Liberal Party had spent 10 years trying to destroy the primary industry in his riding. What was he most worried about? I might lose my job. So, one thing I've learned after all these years is elections matter. You can never prejudge what's going to happen in an election. And I told him that. I said, elections matter, and you're not going to lose, Chris. I'm going to win next time. So last night, as you know, for me, it's a large tweet. It's around 150,000 now. I said, I challenge you, Chris. If you believe you did this for conviction, like you guys, I don't believe you should cross the floor. I think you should resign. And if you believe you want to switch parties and still be the MP from that riding, then run in a by-election under that party's banner, because that you weren't elected as a Liberal. So have the courage of your conviction. Even Sheila Copps did that way back when, in the dark ages. Back, I had a lot of hair then. And Sheila Copps said that when they get in government, they get rid of the GST, and she'd resign if they didn't get rid of the GST. And guess what? They didn't get rid of the GST, so she resigned and ran in the by-election to get reelected. Chris, if you have that conviction, resign. Show the courage and resign. And I'll give you a scoop right here. Chris, if you do that and you resign and run as a Liberal in the riding, let's go tour. I'll run for the Conservatives against you in your riding, and we'll see who wins.
Well, wouldn't that be something to cover, and wouldn't that be something to see? Unfortunately, I don't think Chris will take you up on your offer.
Probably not. It's too soft and cushy to sit there in the fifth row. He's sitting in an area that I noticed where they put him today. You know what the Liberals call it, that area that he's sitting in? Look, first of all, there's no such thing as a bad seat in the House of Commons. It's a huge privilege to be there no matter where you are. But they have a little area on the Liberal side, and the Liberals call it the dumpster seats.
Wow.
And what the dumpster seats are, if you look around, that's where they put the ministers they dump from cabinet. So Wilkinson and all these guys that Carney's dumped from cabinet, they all sit in a little area. So they put Chris in with all the dumpster ministers.
Wow.
So,
and
I hope you feel at home and got your 5 minutes of fame, Chris.
Well, and this is actually what I was going to say, because if you're the Liberals, and even the way Mark Carney framed Chris crossing the floor, he said, that's exceptionally valuable. He didn't say Chris is exceptionally valuable. He just said that the fact that, there's a number that crossed the floor is exceptionally valuable. So, Chris to Carney is just a tool to be used and then discarded. So even if you're the Liberals, how do you even trust somebody who has, after decades of being with the Conservative Party in the provincial and then the federal, how do you trust him at all? And what is Chris even thinking? Because there's no way he's going to be running in Parliament ever again after this election.
You know, Churchill called it ratting. When you cross the floor, you're a rat, right? You're a rat to your own party. You're a rat to the people in your community who elected you under one party banner. It's called ratting. Now, Churchill ratted. He also went back. He called that re-ratting. He said, ratting's easy. Re-ratting is hard, going back to where you left. But in Chris's case, he's a rat and he ain't coming back, and we wouldn't have him. So he can make himself comfortable over there. The question of trust is always there. And it dogged Scott Bryson, another rat from Nova Scotia, who crossed the floor to join the Paul Martin government from the Conservative Party, and he at least got a cabinet job from it. And he was bought for a cabinet job. And when he went to try and run for the Liberal leadership, because, what the heck, Bob Rae, who had ratted from the NDP to the Liberals, had run for the leadership. They asked, he couldn't get any support, Scott. Why? They didn't trust him. Even after years in cabinet, they still didn't trust him because he had been a rat. Now, ask everybody who watches this wonderful, wonderful show of yours. Do you trust anyone who lies to you? Do you ever trust them again? Do you trust anyone that stands up in public and says, these Liberals are causing massive economic harm in my community? For years and years, 6 years, Chris said that. By the way, his pension just vested. Not to say anything, but he was elected in 2019 and his pension just vested. So if he's ratting, do you actually think that anyone on that side's going to trust him other than the number, right? He's taken the number from 3 to 2 to try and get this budget passed. That's the only value he has to Carney.
What about as a friend, Rick? Because this must have been tough for you. You've been asking him repeatedly about these rumors, and he's been, now that he's been lying to you this whole time. How did you feel when you realized that he's been lying to you this whole time?
Well, as soon as the iPolitics story came out, I texted him. I tried to reach him, and he wasn't responding. I said, come on, Chris. And, we've been friends for 2 decades. I think, I can be a bit of a bull. It's why I enjoyed so much doing the slush fund and some of these other things, but in Parliament. But our former party president, Rob Batherson, who ran in Halifax West in the last election, actually put it very eloquently in his post on Twitter last night, a statement he made. And he started off and he said, I've known Chris d'Entremont for 30 years. I've been involved in politics that long, if not longer. This is the greatest personal betrayal that I've ever experienced. And we're all, we all see what made the Toronto Blue Jays unique, right? It wasn't just that they could hit and do error-free baseball. It's that they were a rare team. They loved going to battle every day with each other. And that's what it's like when you choose to join a party and then go into caucus. So if you're a volunteer for Chris or for me, yes, you get attachment to that person, but you've made a choice because you believe in conservative principles, and you're giving up your precious time to go and volunteer in your way to make your country better by trying to elect somebody with values that you identify with. You don't give that time up. So while I have a friendship betrayal, the people in his riding on his executive, his board, the people who volunteered for him, they have the biggest betrayal of all because they put their heart, soul, and blood into volunteering. There's a lot of things that they could be doing based on what Chris said he would do, based on the values he said he stood for. And with one weak approach by some lame liberal who treated him nicely And he felt he was aggrieved. He says, oh, well, I guess I'll go to those guys and forget about everything I dislike about them. Like, I agree. I don't see how he can run again. He may think he can run. I mean, he said to me he can't win. He thinks he can't win now. Boy, you want to see how this is going to be like as a floor crosser? Floor crossers don't do well regardless of party. We had one, and I know there's some stuff saying, you guys didn't complain when Alana Alsef went from the Liberals to you guys when Andrew Scheer was leader. Fair enough. I wasn't there. I wouldn't have accepted her as into our caucus anyway. I don't like floor crossers. I think they should run. And that's a betrayal to these people. Run separately. In the last parliament, there were a lot of Liberals who wanted to cross the floor. A lot. When we were up at the heights and they were afraid for their job like Chris is, Chrétien used to call them the nervous Nellies. When they were afraid, they were coming and approaching all of us. You could be standing in the washroom next to the House of Commons and you'd hear a little whisper from one of them. Hey, Rick, what do you think? We get along. Would you guys think about it? And they were coming to us like rats off the Trudeau ship. And Pierre's view was, no, I'm sorry, we're not taking floor crossers. We're not. We will earn the votes in those ridings. We're not going to get it the easy way. But the Liberals obviously don't have those perspectives.
And I know you're getting a lot of these types of messages, and we are as well, from individuals within Mr. d'Entremont's riding that either they voted for him or they were on the campaign team, they were volunteering, etc. They just feel so discouraged and so betrayed. What kind of advice or words of wisdom do you have for those people?
Off the top, my advice is, Bill Clinton, I share your pain, man. We feel it just as much. Don't worry, there will be an election and we will get rid of them, whether it's on this budget vote, whether it's before the spring. This is a minority government. Without a deal with the NDP, minority governments don't last more than 18 months. We'll be in an election next year. Sorry, my staff are talking in the background. I don't know if you can hear one of them, but when I talk to them, I say, we'll get through this, and I will guarantee we're going to have a better candidate and we will win the seat. What Chris's riding has been going through the last couple of years is unique in the country. You may have seen, I certainly railed on about it. There was every member of parliament in the 44th parliament knew what an elver was. An elver is a baby eel, translucent. They're born in the Sargasso Sea. They get drift up here in the currents, and then they go into the rivers, end up in your lake, and become an eel. They love eels in Asia. They love to eat them. They have been fished out the world, except in Nova Scotia and southern New Brunswick. They have 10 years gone from $200 a kilogram to $5,000 a kilogram. They're very easy to catch. You stand on the river at midnight, because they come with the tide and the dark and the moon, and you stand there with what looks like a net that you use for skimming leaves out of a pool, and you put them into buckets with a bubbler that you get, a bucket and a bubbler you can get from Home Hardware, and there's illegal money going on. We've had only 14% of Nova Scotia rivers are licensed, but we have 300 rivers and we have thousands of poachers on. $500 million of illegal elvers went out of this country last year to China. The center of the corruption and criminal activity is in Chris's riding. It's in a place called Metagan. And Chris and I worked hard together on this with the RCMP, with fisheries, with the license holders, and everyone trying to get some law and order. There's no RCMP on between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. There's no fisheries officers on that time. Drugs are dropped off the shores of Chris's shores at night. Boats go up and bring the drugs in. There's human trafficking that results from the drugs, the criminal activity. These people that were before the committee own one of the wharfs. They have a They were being threatened because they were reporting the criminal activity of the police, and occasionally at 2 a.m., gunshots would be fired into their house right through. Almost missed, the final one was an almost hit their daughter. So they moved out and had to stay for months, every 2 days, moving around. While they were appearing before a committee, and they're from Chris's riding, the criminals took a backhoe and mowed down their cottage on the Metagan River as penalty for appearing before the Fisheries Committee. This is what's going on in Chris's riding. This is what we had in countless meetings with Liberal fisheries ministers, with Dominique LeBlanc as public safety minister, to try and get them to enforce the law. We have a part of Nova Scotia where there is no law enforcement, where as a result of the cash that's coming in from China through organized crime, we have now massive drug problem in that part of our province. We have human trafficking. We have meth labs. All of this is happening. When that tank house was burnt down in 2020, the second floor was a meth lab. That's why the community burnt it down. This is what's going on in that part. It's right on the edge. It's 20 minutes from the border of my riding, and it's him burnt down a lobster pound, but this is what's going on in my riding as well. The Liberals would not do anything about it. Absolutely nothing about it. So while, if you're in a downtown Toronto riding and you're feeling like, I'm not being paid attention to, or maybe I won't win, and you cross the floor, and what they do. In Chris's riding, the Liberals are responsible for the crime and the violence that's going on in his riding. And after fighting it and fighting it and fighting it, he now thinks it's okay to sit with the same people that would do absolutely nothing to fix this. So that's an affront to all the people in his community, everybody that know this was going on. So it's unbelievable. Like, if you add all those layers upon layers upon layers, you can say, how could this guy now sit with the very people that would not respond to solving this problem? It's not a partisan problem. When people's homes are being shot into at 2 a.m., where people's property is being destroyed, when 80-year-old people are asking if their neighbors have guns so they can protect themselves in their house after 10 o'clock at night, when the criminals are around and there's no police, and there's nothing that Dominique LeBlanc's public safety minister or the fisheries ministers would do to help, and you go and sit with those people now? How do you do that? How do you look your constituents in the face and say, never mind, wasn't their fault, I was wrong?
Well, and constituency week is going to be very interesting for Mr. D'Entremont that next week. That's for sure.
That's for sure.
And it's just, the contrast couldn't be more clear, because here's you weren't successful in the last election, but you're here saying, I'm going to run again and I'm going to win, versus Chris D'Entremont, who did win in the last election and is sitting here moping around of, if there was an election today that, I wouldn't win. So get after it.
But not only that, It sounds like you've built such trust in your community that community members are still coming to you with this news. They're upset and they're coming to you for advice, and they're coming to you for comfort.
Yeah, well, understand, I had the unfortunate circumstance of only being the only riding in the country without an NDP candidate. So that was a contributor. But in the essence of all of this, like in the election campaign, I had people in Chris's riding asking for my lawn signs. They didn't want Chris's sign. They wanted mine, the fisherman, right? And so the thought that you can't go and do the work to earn the votes, that the easy way out is to go to, the current cool kid on the block, the former bureaucrat, Mark Carney. By the way, he's not a banker. He was a bureaucrat.
Yeah.
Almost his whole career, he worked for government after he was pushed out of Goldman Sachs after a few years. And he didn't run anything there. So he's pushed out, and he goes and works for the Department of Finance, the Bank of Canada, and the British Central Bank. Those are all bureaucrat jobs, right? But you think that this bureaucrat, the guy who spent his entire life as a bureaucrat in government, the sort of Lester Pearson of our day, maybe, is without the insights into foreign policy, because Mark Carney's screwing that up too, since apparently he loves China, is that that's the guy, and those are the people who have been telling you to pound sand on what's going on in your riding, that now you say you want to do it. The first person to hug Chris at Caucus, going into the Liberal caucus, was Sean Fraser, the Minister of Justice, who would do absolutely nothing to help restore justice in Chris's riding.
And the same guy who isn't lifting a finger and not saying a thing about the Supreme Court ruling around the mandatory minimums for pedophiles. No, soft on criminals. Let's worry about the criminals' rights. Let's not lay charges in the case of the illegal activity. You know what they did last year on the illegal activity around these Elbers? They brought in regulations. Because regulations stop criminals, right? Oh, well, Rick, they'll abide by the regulations. Like, these are the people that Chris now aspires to be part of in the backbench of the Liberal Party. Like, it's crazy that he would think that the people who think that taking firearms away from legal gun owners is the way to stop crime, that by saying that people who commit rape and Bill C-75, which they passed, can serve their time at home. By the way, none of that has changed. The provision in the Justice Act is still there that requires the judges, first and foremost, to give the minimum possible standards in bail. That's in the Act still. They haven't removed that. So, that these are the folks that Chris fought against, that Chris stood up 10 days ago decrying the Prime Minister and what he's doing, that in his speech in June in the House, he went through a litany of harms that the Carney government was doing to his community, that all of a sudden say, well, I didn't really mean it. Like, come on. So I'm looking forward to him standing up and trying to defend what he opposed, whether it's in the House, whether it's in the riding. I don't know. Maybe he's going to go on vacation next week so he doesn't have to face his constituents. He's just had 2 parliamentary boondoggles off to Europe this summer, so maybe he wants a third. Well, wouldn't it be poetic justice if the budget ended up falling anyway and he had to go an election and then didn't win his seat? Wouldn't that be something?
Well, you need to know, besides myself willing to crush him like a bug, there are a couple of really good people who contacted me last night that even if Chris was a Tory and they ran for the Liberals, would crush Chris. So, Chris, good luck running, because you're not going to be able to get against it. You're not running against a local defeated MLA this time from the Liberals. You're going to be running against people from the fishing community, and you will not get back in.